Buddha looked around and he saw that people weren't happy. They weren't happy for a lot of reasons. They weren't happy because they didn't have what they would like to have. They weren't happy because they didn't have what they expected to have. They weren't happy because they didn't have what they thought they should have, which are three different conditions. And we have to approach those three different conditions differently. There is an idea of justice in the world, and it's just an idea. It has nothing to do with reality. It has to do with people. There certainly are just people, and if enough just people get together, they try to create a just society, but there is no intrinsic justice that exists, other than, we might say, karma. But karma doesn't do us a whole lot of good if we don't get what we want. So karma doesn't give us much comfort. To some people, they take comfort from it because they say, oh, well, they did that, but they'll get theirs. But the Buddha did not encourage that kind of thinking, because that's still a spiteful kind of thinking, and you're still tied into the desire to have things. If we look at the religious leaders that were in the old world and the religious leaders that were in the new world, one of the things we notice is that they tend to be very, very serious. There are many things that sets the historical Buddha apart from everyone else. We always emphasize the fact that he was enlightened, whatever that means, and that he had attained this great clarity, that he had peace, that he was happy. And it all sounds pretty good. But there is one thing that was distinct about the Buddha that's very different than the other religious leaders who have come and gone in the world, whether they're ancient leaders or even current leaders, is the Buddha smiled. We rarely, and I can't think of an instance, but I don't want to say that he never frowned, because the minute I say he never frowned, someone's going to go out and spend hundreds, perhaps thousands of hours digging through the sutras, trying to find the one instance where it says, and the Buddha frowned. But the Buddha was known for smiling. But he was certainly known for looking and seeing what was going on. And there's many, many different techniques he's given us. Many different avenues, many different paths, many different ways to approach this problem of being unhappy because we don't get what we want. Being unhappy because we don't get what we deserve. Being unhappy because we don't get what we expected. There's many approaches to this, and one of his strongest approaches was to encourage people to take joy in their work. Now this goes immediately to the situation of lay people. Because in one sense you could say, and I think it would be fair, that the monks, at least in the Buddhist time, and the nuns in the Buddhist time, were all doing the same thing. And they didn't necessarily look at it as work. Maybe they did. I don't know. It was too long ago to know. I do know this, that monks and nuns were told that there was only one occupation. There was only one vocation that was appropriate for them. And that's why Buddhism looked like it did for so many years. And that was to practice the Buddha Dharma in the way the Buddha taught it. And so they were restricted in having a trade or having a different profession. They were 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, monks and nuns, period. That doesn't mean they were successful monks and nuns. That just means that every day of the week, they were to do the very best they could to become Buddhas. That's a positive way of saying it. That they were to reflect upon their actions and reflect upon their words. That they were to reflect upon their thoughts. We have an idea in the way of Zen that thoughts are tremendously powerful. And we know that words are powerful because they can cut people to the core. They can cut them to the quick. But I often think that thoughts are much more powerful than words, because without thoughts, words would never happen. Thoughts form our attitudes. They form the way we treat other people, the way we walk towards them, how we would smile or not smile at them, how we would clasp their hand or refuse to clasp their hand. Words are this attitude expressed, and they're obvious, but most people are sensitive to the way they're treated without words. Matter of fact, everyone is. Why is that person looking at me that way? So the Buddha was aware of the power of all these things. And when he taught mindfulness, we talked about 3 things last Sunday that during the Dharma class that a monk had learned. Was it last Sunday? No, that was last Wednesday. Yeah, get them all mixed up. And one of those things was mindfulness. And if you look at mindfulness as it's taught today in the popular meditation centers, and I say popular and I say meditation centers because I'm thinking of these places that teach Vipassana meditation, which also can be translated as mindfulness. And I honestly don't know any that are temples. Okay, they're popular places. They're nice, comfortable, airy places that you can go and have a cup of tea, talk about your religious quest, do a little bit of meditation, and overanalyze everything. And that mindfulness of the Buddha was not about analyzing or overanalyzing. A little bit of analysis was okay. But the Buddha's mindfulness was very simple. If you said something stupid, why did you say it? And the person asking the question should be you. And if you don't ask the question of yourself, then your teacher's job is to pose the question to you. Why did you do that? And that's not a request for excuses. That's not a request for justifications. One of the great confusions that takes place is when the teacher asks a question, people think that they're going to answer in the same mode, in the same plane of existence that they made the mistake in. And that isn't what the question is about. The question is, why did you do that? Why did you do it? Why did you say it? Why did you treat people that way? Why did you react that way? Why were you disappointed when you didn't get what you wanted? To the average person, that seems like an obvious thing. It seems so very obvious. Well, I wanted it. Sure. But why were you so disappointed? Why were you unhappy? Why did it ruin your day? Why are you angry? Why do you feel less than you did before? Why do you feel like you're somehow lacking? Why were you unhappy because you didn't get what you deserved? Where'd that deserve come from? Because you worked really, really, really hard and you put extra time in? Years ago, I don't even know where this came from, but I read something and it's come up over and over again. No good deed will go unpunished. I don't know who said that. If you figure it out, Sandy, tell me who said that, because I'd like to give them credit. But it's an interesting kind of thing. I was talking with someone last night, one of the hardest working people I know, dedicated, tour job, has been for years, goes the extra mile, then goes an extra 100 miles, does what needs to be done, makes sure that there are no loose ends, just puts out that extra effort all the time. And rarely gets rewarded. I can remember years ago working at a car dealership where the bosses in the car dealership laughed at people like that. They thought they were saps. They went that extra distance. They did that extra stuff. They took work home. What a sap. They're not getting paid for it. We can use them. And those are the kind of people that get asked to do more and more and more by the boss who goes home and does everything but work at home. And they're taken advantage of. But some people could remark, well, they're allowed to be taken advantage of. they're only taken advantage of is if they get unhappy when they don't get what they deserve. I did all of this stuff. Why didn't I get rewarded? Don't ever do anything except for the sake of doing it. I'm not saying don't do something that's needed to be done. I'm saying that if you're looking for the reward afterwards, you'll almost always be disappointed. People like that threaten other people. People like that work 80 hours a week instead of 40 hours a week threaten someone in their position. They don't want to let them get too close to their position because maybe they'll take their position. They threaten someone because the person has doubts about themselves. They feel guilty because they don't put in that much work, and the next thing you know, they're resenting that person and they're treating them in a very shoddy manner. Oh, the psychology goes on and on and on. So the Buddha said, take joy in your work. And that take joy in your work, I think back in those times was aimed primarily at lay people. Whatever your work might be, take joy in it. He didn't say, do the work so that you'll get the recognition so that then you can feel good about yourself. Because the world is not fair. Not from that way of thinking it's not fair. Everybody that does good things does not get a pat on the back. I'm not talking about plaques or dinners or gold watches. I'm talking about somebody saying thank you. Boy, did you do a great thing. Wow, look at what you did. Oh, thank you so much for your dedication. Why don't you take a couple extra hours off today and have lunch on me? Yeah, right. That happens all the time. But if you take joy in the work you do, if you take joy in doing it, if you take satisfaction from what you've done, then your reward, if you want to call it a reward, if you need a reward, then you have it right there. If you're supposed to put a booklet together and you put the booklet together and the booklet is really nice and it does the job and it doesn't have too many typos in it and you're happy with it, then there's your joy. Enjoy it right there. Enjoy the process of putting it together so that this thing will be done correctly. And the Buddha taught, take joy in the work of others. If everybody did what the Buddha said, we'd have a pretty neat place. Sandy would be happy with the work she did, and everybody would tell her what a great job she did. And Sandy, being the great enlightened being she is, she would not expect it. So every time somebody thanked her for this wonderful thing she did, she'd be surprised. When we chant, there are many, many things we can learn from chanting. But one of the great things to learn from chanting is to be surprised. People do things by rote. The biggest dangers of a new Buddhist or a new Buddhist practitioner or a new Zen person, a new person that's coming around, is when everything gets every day. How many times can you chant the Heart Sutra before your mind starts to wander? I have no idea. 100? 300? 3,000? At what point does it become so commonplace and so easy and so rote that you no longer have to think about it? The minute you start thinking about something else, you're not taking joy in your work. Because your work as a practitioner, as a Buddhist, is to chant the Heart Sutra. That's all you're doing. There is no other work to be done at that moment. This is why the Vietnamese always say that meditation and chanting are the same thing. They are the same thing if you're just chanting. They are not the same thing if you're doing anything other than chanting. If you're analyzing what's going on, no. If you're daydreaming about something else, if you got distracted, no. But if you're just chanting, then you have this wonderful joy in your work. People used to ask me, this is when I had hardly been doing this stuff for very long, when I'd only been doing it for 4 or 5 years. And people would come in and they'd say, how do you do that over and over without getting bored? And I go, what? Well, how do you chant that chant without getting bored? Because you've done it a lot of times, right? Well, yeah. And the first place that I trained, we used to chant the Heart Sutra at the beginning of meditation, at the end of meditation. That's the only thing we chanted. That's the only thing we chanted on Sunday. The only time we chanted anything other than the Heart Sutra was on the Buddha's birthday and memorials and stuff like that, which made it really interesting for the guys that were trying to learn how to be priests, because they didn't get a whole lot of practice doing this stuff. But boy, we were good at the Heart Sutra, the Hanya Shingyo. And we could chant it and chant it and chant it and chant it and chant it, and the people would say, how do you keep it fresh? I didn't have a ready answer. But one day doing meditation, I realized I've certainly done a lot more hours of meditation than I'll ever do of chanting the Heart Sutra. I've been meditating since I was 15 years old. A lot of it really bad. But the one thing it never did was become commonplace. And when I began doing Zen meditation, and I finally learned how to do it, I was really doing nothing. It was a great big nothing. Because to do it right is not to focus on any particular thing, is not to have any expectations, is not to think about what you didn't get that you wanted, that you didn't get because you deserved it. All of those things have to disappear. And you just sit, as Dogen Zenji said. Just sit. If you get bored, you're not sitting. Boredom to me is a unique condition. It's where people pull away from reality because they're dissatisfied with reality. There certainly are tedious situations and there's tedious people. And you can not be very entertained by them. But to be bored, you have to pull back and make an observation. This person is incredibly tedious, and they're boring. So how does meditation keep from being boring? I've done meditation a couple of years now. How does it keep from being boring? Because every time you start to meditate, you take joy in your work. This is new stuff. I think back when I was about 40 years old, even though I knew that there was no end of the road, and I knew the road was the whole point, and there was no destination, even though it was talked about a lot, enlightenment, blah, 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 and then we have the Buddha for 45 years. After his enlightenment, what did he do? Well, one of the things he did was he meditated. And he got some good meditation in. And every time he started, it was new. Well, that's what meditation is. Can you get bored? Only if you pull back from reality. But if you stay immersed in what you're doing, then every time you go to sit, it's fresh, it's new. Every time you go to chant, it's fresh, it's new. How many times can you recite the Buddha's name before you stop paying attention to what you're doing? Well, if you could count, which gets you in trouble right away, recite the Buddha's name and over here. I used to have to do that. It drove me crazy. When you're the monk hitting the fish and you're supposed to do it 108 times and then you're supposed to stop, how do you keep track of that? Took me a while to figure that out. But at one time I would go 1, 2, 3. And I thought, this sucks. This definitely is not a lot of fun. Because I just wanted to recite the Buddha's name, and here I am trying to keep track of it. And then I discovered, hey, 108 times 108 beads, this works out pretty good. And if I double count a bead, who's going to know anyway? Because I knew my teacher wasn't going 1, 2, 3. I knew that. It's a difficult task. But the Buddha gave us lots of hints how to do it. Enjoy what you're doing. If you're not enjoying what you're doing, then you're not engaged in what you're doing. enjoy what other people are doing. If you're not enjoying what other people are doing, you're not engaged in them. And to be not engaged in other people is not to be not engaged in yourself. The great illusion is that there's something different about other people. There is no difference. They are you. This you will learn through your meditation practice. But if you begin to take joy in what good things happen to them, you've got a very happy situation and you stop worrying about what you didn't get. And it really doesn't matter what you get, because I've lived long enough now to know that there is no thing that you can get that's going to make you happy. If there is a universal truth about happiness, there is no thing, there is no position, and there is no power that can make you happy. Not the way the Buddha talked about happiness, because the way the Buddha talked about happiness, it cannot be taken away from you. And anything that you have can be taken away from you, except your joy in work.